Welcome to Westbrook's COVID Conversations. Joining me today is Robert Moore. Robert is the CEO and owner of the Moore Family Collection. Today we'll be discussing South African lodges, hotels, and tourism, especially in the context of COVID-19. Rob, thanks so much for joining me.
Pleasure, Dino.
Maybe to start, for those who aren't familiar with the Moore Family Collection, can you give us a brief overview of the portfolio?
Yeah, just a quick summary. So we're a business that's 20 years old. We started in the Sabi Sand Game Reserve with our first property, Lion Sands. We've grown to approximately 150 rooms across the group. We operate in Cape Town, in Mpumalanga, Northwest, and Limpopo. And we also recently opened up the first boutique hotel in Victoria Falls. Turnover approximately 500 million this current budgeted year, pre-COVID. I must mention that. Staff 850 people approximately. And what makes us, in terms of the topic of discussion here, is we're about 80% of our market is international. So the way we define that is inbound travel, and that's needless to say the current market is very difficult because, as you know, there's a ban on not only just domestically interprovincial travel, but also a ban on international travel.
Yeah, so Rob, I suppose that's the pressing question, is where some of the inner city hotels have perhaps been able to pivot into isolation facilities and so on. Your lodges being located in game reserves and up near Vic Falls maybe don't have that same luxury. How have you been able to respond to COVID?
So our approach has been right from the first announcement of the lockdown is really we've adjusted our strategy based on information that has come to us on a week-to-week basis. I mean, we were ready to go with a partial reopening on the 1st of May, prior to the extension of the lockdown and then the introduction of the risk-adjusted strategy, which currently, we have two sort of official bodies within our organization. We've got the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, which in essence is the private voice leading into South African tourism. And last week they presented a scenario which is anticipating as late as October, November for domestic corporate travel to only be commencing then. So needless to say, that's required us to move from a partial opening and preparation to receive guests into a complete kind of mothballing of the business until later in the year.
Rob, I mean, that's a scary thought that you mentioned there. If domestic business travel will only open towards the end of the year, what does that mean for leisure travel, domestic and foreign, which I suppose is a large portion of your business?
Yeah, so on the middle road scenario that they're operating off and recommending we doing our scenario planning off is domestic corporate October, November, domestic leisure November, December into January, and only international travel looking to come back into the country as late as March 2021. Look, we do know, I mean, that's a very dire scenario, and we do know that even within other industries, there tends to be quite a lot of pushback. There's a lot more messaging in the media now about, in terms of the lesser of the two evils, in terms of the impact on the economy. So we're hopeful that our strategy at the moment is very aligned pretty much across the entire tourism hospitality industry. Is that the key thing that we need to do now is we need to get the data in front of government. So we are busy. We've been compiling a relevant survey over the last 7 days. It's actually going to be going out this afternoon to the industry. And in essence, the strategy behind that survey is to get the data, align it, and the data, the questionnaires or the survey will be done, looking at or against the scenario that's been presented to us. And I know what that data is going to tell us, that it's the more than likely, if we stay committed to that particular scenario, as I mentioned in the dates in terms of reopening to travel, we'll probably see a restriction of anything between 65 up to 75% of the total tourism industry in this country. So I think when we present those facts in front of the minister and up to the command committee who's controlling the rules and regulations around this pandemic, I think I think hopefully common sense will prevail, and hopefully we'll see some loosening up of the travel restrictions, both from a corporate point of view and a leisure point of view, and then ultimately a very important revenue source for the country, and certainly for our business, is the international inbound industry.
Rob, how do you foresee the tourism industry adapting to life with COVID? If we're to assume that COVID is something that's going to become a part of our daily lives, I would suppose that it's very hard for tourism to be business as usual. But that said, perhaps with certain changes and with certain different ways of doing business, you can adapt.
Dino, I mean, I've got to, from a business point of view, we are adjusting our procedures to be aligned to the I guess the containment of COVID-19, to reduce the spread, the contamination of it. However, on a personal level, I guess, and what I mean by personal level, so from a company point of view, we're putting all of those procedures in place as when you go out now. If you're going into any of the retail stores, there's hand sanitizer at the entrance, and there's social spacing, etc., etc. And we'll be applying that as well in our guest experience areas. But I do believe that personally, I think once society has gotten over the fear which surrounds this virus, I do think we're going to realize that this is a virus that's going to stay with us. It's a virus that does not seem to pose a great risk to a very high percentage of the population and travelers. So therefore, in terms of long-term change of habits, I actually, I may be swimming against the tide here, but I don't think they're going to be, lasting behavior changes from travelers and from guests, because I do believe that once we've put this virus into perspective, I think we're going to realize that there may have been a mass global overreaction. Yes, there are people vulnerable, but this virus tends to be no more deadly than many others that already exist within our society and our communities. So long-lasting changes, I think it's going to be prevalent in the beginning, but I think as we learn more and as time goes by, I think we are going to settle very close to where we were prior to this virus impacting the world the way it has.
Rob, I'm interested in the situation at Vic Falls. We obviously, as South Africans, know a little bit around what the circumstances and situation is here locally. How has that situation unfolded there as regards lockdown, tourism changes to sort of consumer and travel behavior, etc., relative to South Africa?
So I mean, Zimbabwe as a country is first of all, it's a very different place to be doing business, with very different leadership involvement and guidance and supports. So second of all, the support that's been offered down in South Africa, there's been zero support in Zimbabwe. The communication of the virus up in Zim has been erratic and unreliable. So, but I do, we've only been operating up there for the last 2.5 years, and certainly what we've learned in terms of business skills up there is that you have to be completely self-sufficient. Even in normal operating time. So at the moment, Victoria Falls, which I would imagine that the economy up there is probably 90% driven by tourism. It is a ghost town, and every business is mothballed. The people have gone home, and they are there. The coming weeks as we go into winter, and it's not a farming period of time, and there is a very high risk. You're starting to see it in the media, but throughout Zimbabwe, there's going to be a very high risk of starvation coming in there, and that's not a sensationalistic comment. That's a reality. As long as the borders stay closed, and the supplies cannot come in from South Africa. And because the agricultural industry in Zimbabwe has been crippled over the last decade or two, Zim is in a very difficult position. The irony of Zimbabwe, I suppose, is that the spirit of the people is remarkable. I'm not sure what can really put that down to, but we've had to reduce our payroll to a very small stipend, but yet the staff remain, and we've said to them that they don't need to come in and look after the property, but they remain, they're coming in and they're looking after the asset. They in the gardens and in the hotel doing their maintenance, and that's not because we've asked them to do it. It's just because they have that incredible pride in their place of work, and I think that tends to be a character that we see throughout Zimbabwe.
It is interesting and heartwarming in times like this to hear of stories of the human spirit and how we come together in the most difficult of times. Maybe in closing, Rob, you mentioned the survey and the report that will be released this afternoon. What would be your message to government as regards the reintegration and opening of the tourism and hospitality industries?
Yeah, I think they've seen it as a non-essential part of our economy and part of society, and I think they realize that we do employ a lot of people. We do, through our guests and through our revenues, we do protect and preserve large areas of conservation area, which is an asset which is very valuable to South Africans and appreciated by South Africans and the world, throughout the world. So my message to them is they need to understand that without revenues coming into the industry, we will see the industry restricting, and it's the same as the view across restaurants. Just because it may not be at the center of the South African economy, it does not mean that it can survive an extended period of no revenue. I mean, tourism has been spoken about by our government is to be a very important employer of people, especially unskilled people in remote locations, which we do. And without this revenue coming in, those communities will not be receiving salaries, and there could be some really devastating human impact happening over the coming months if they do not realize that we have to get the wheels of tourism moving again. And hopefully, with the domestic wheels moving, and once we've been able to prove that we've got the health and safety protocols in place, then hopefully they'll start to look to open up the international borders again, and we can get back to normal.
Rob, that's been hugely interesting, and all the best with your engagements with government going forward. We certainly hope that they're productive and that they result in a quicker and more swift reintegration of the tourism and hospitality industries than what you've spoken about earlier in this conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Dina. I mean, I think all of us, we need to get South Africa back to work. And because I don't think there's an industry in this country that's not being impacted by it, and I think we all have a moral and a civil duty to stand up and get back into the offices and get back to work and get our economy working, because all the relief and support that we've been given, we know that comes at a cost, and the sooner we can get back and become independent of any of those support, the sooner we can carry on rebuilding our country and re-employing people and dealing with all those other issues that we had prior to this pandemic. So, Dina, thank you, and thanks to your investors and your viewers, and we'll see you on the flip side.
For sure. That's Robert Moore. Rob is the CEO and owner of the Moore Family Collection. Thanks for joining us today, Rob. Cheers.
Thank you, Dina.